The Norse mythology. This mythology is an interesting, enriching and an all-encompassing history about the ancient Scandinavian world. Centuries before the Vikings set out on the raids, and thus appeared on the horizon of history, became numerous and innumerable stories invented about the gods of the North. The stories were passed from one generation to the next, and told the next one, and formed a big one part of the culture of the people who lived in Scandinavia. The Norse gods, sometimes at first sight well-disposed, became evil-natured at once, and brought chaos from time to time, and destroy over the people. The gods of the North often had human traits in their deeds and actions. But what qualities made these gods so human? And what deeds made these characters to gods, from the point of view of the Vikings? Each god and goddess not only had their personal abilities, as well as strengths and weaknesses, but also an individual psychological profile. This distinction made it possible for the people of ancient Scandinavia to gods easily distinguished from one another. An important aspect is that the gods of the North changed the lifestyle, and have enormously influenced the doings and actions of the Vikings. It started with the rituals of sacrifice, and continued with the style of living, and the fighting manner in battle. According to Norse belief, the deceased Viking went to Valhalla, the sky the Vikings, when he fought bravely and his weapon when dying held in hand. This gave the Vikings, among other things, fearlessness in a battle. In this video, of the first part about the Norse gods, we will first give us a rough overview of Viking mythology. Here we go. The Icer. The Icer were gods who belonged to the great family of the most important god, the god Odin. The family was also called the main group of gods in Norse mythology. The god Odin was considered the father of all Icer. Above that, there was a second group of gods, the group of Vanir, derived from Old Norse, the Shining Ones. Beside the Icer, the Vanir was the older of the two gods groups in Norse mythology. They live in Jotunheim. As gods of the hearth fire and farming, the Vanir have characteristics such as fertility and closeness to the earth, and attributed to prosperity. After a mythological battle, the Vanir war against the Icer, the Vanir were defeated. The Icer, as a sign of peace and to secure it, gave as hostages the sea god Njord and his children, the twins Freya and Freyr. In return, the Vanir received the Icer god Har, and the wise giant Mimir. The great war between the Vanir and the Icer started by the evil sorceress Heda, who came to a city of the Icer, and a rumor spread, which the Icer in turn provoked and made suspicious. The proud Icer couldn't handle the rumor and the shame that came with it, except the evil sorceress Heda was caught by the Icer, and bound with ropes and hooks, and burned at the stake. The sorceress has always risen from the dead after being burned, and wanted to humiliate the Icer even more. When the godfather Odin found out about the doings of the evil sorceress Heda, he threw the spear of war towards the Vanir. As a result, the Vanir attacked the homeland of the Icer, the city of Asgard. But the Icer were much stronger than the Vanir, and smashed them into many individual parts. The war ended. The power structure in the world of gods in the North changed, and keepers of the peace were elected from both sides, so that this conflict never erupts again. The Icer sent Odin's brothers to the Vanirs Mimir and Honor. These gods taught the first man to see, hear, taste and smell. The Vanir sent to the Icer the god Quasir and the god of the sea, the god Njord, and Njord's children Frey and Freya. But Odin, Honor's brother, was hesitant in his decisions. He didn't have the patience and diplomatic skills for the talks with the representatives of the Icer. Therefore, in his presence, the famous god Mimir started the conversation. He was able to answer all the questions asked by the Vanir. At some point, in the opinion of the Icer, Mimir was the voice and the mind of Honor. In addition, the Vanir began to believe that the Icer want to fool them. In the belief that the Icer want to trick the Vanir, and outraged by this, the Vanir chopped off Mimir's head and sent it back to the Icer. Odin didn't want to give up on Mimir and declare him dead. Odin embalmed Mimir's head. Mimir's head became the source of wisdom. Because of this, the tree of wisdom grew on Mimir's head. The tree is also called Yggdrasil. The Icer were not immortal. These fell in battle, or died of old age, like a human. These qualities set the Icer apart from the rest of the Norse gods. The Icer aged like ordinary people. In order not to remain too old and young, the magic apples of Idun helped the Icer. The Icer dwelt in the city, which was built on clouds in the sky, namely the city of Asgard. The city of Asgard was through with the city of ordinary people, and was connected with Midgard by a bridge, made of a rainbow. The bridge called Bifrost. The Icer already knew when and by when during the end of the world Ragnarok were killed. The Ragnarok, Old Norse fate of the gods or cause, sense of origin, is the legend of history and the fall of the gods and the world, which in Norse mythology, as the Voluspa was prophesied. The last section of Ragnarok depicts the new world that emerges after the fall of the old world. Ragnarok means the battle of gods and giants, as a result of which the whole world perishes. 3 years of fierce fighting, and then another, as well long Fimbulwinter announced the Ragnarok. The wolves Skotli and Hati follow the sun and the moon to devour them. Then stars will fall from the sky. As a result, the earth begins to tremble, all trees are uprooted, all the mountains collapse. In these earthquakes, the Fenris wolf can release from his chains, the Midgard snake comes ashore, which is flooded. The main god Odin. Odin, the king and ruler of Asgard. The ruler of Valhalla. Great warrior of the gods. The ruler of the magical runes of the gods, and the leader of the Valkyries. Odin is the oldest god in Norse mythology. Odin saw the beginning of the very first light in the world. Saw the beginning and fall of the first 9 worlds. In his youth, he took an active part in the battles of the gods. Odin was very often described in the Viking sagas, from the 8th century AD. Before that, only occasionally. The Vikings firmly believed that whoever worships and honors this god went 100% to Valhalla. Valhalla was paradise in Norse mythology. For the Vikings, the name Odin was synonymous with war. But the god Odin had more the character traits of a strategist than by a fierce warrior. In his older years, Odin no longer actively participated in the battles of the gods took part. Odin decided to give an eye to Mimir. Or rather the chopped off and embalmed head of Mimir. In return, Odin was allowed to drink from the fountain of wisdom. The spring flowed, and the tree which grew on Mimir's severed head. The plot provided Odin with foresight, clarity and infinite wisdom in his actions. In addition, Odin was able to uncover the secret of the transition from life to death. But after 1,000 years of wisdom, Odin was still abused by the other gods as bloodthirsty. Odin liked to be brutal, not only with his enemies, but also with friends who weren't his obeyed orders. There are some parallels between Odin and the Hindu god Shiva, who, like Odin, was both a destroyer and a creator. He owes his knowledge to 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, who sit on his shoulders and tell him everything, what is happening in the world, which is why he is also called the Raven God. The Norse god Thor. After Odin, Thor was the supreme and most feared of the gods. He is the son of Odin and the goddess Jord, of the earth. Thor's wife is the beautiful golden-haired Sif, with whom he has a daughter, goddess Thrud. Thor was the god of thunder and lightning. The Vikings believed that if there was thunder and lightning during a storm, that this is Thor hitting an anvil with his hammer. Thor was the protector of gods and humans from terrible monsters. Like Odin, he was one of the most famous gods in the ancient Scandinavian world. Vikings who worshipped Thor were blessed with courage and strength. His distinctive weapon was the hammer Mjolnir, and his power belt Megingard. The hammer could not only hurl lightning at Thor's enemies, but when Thor threw the hammer at his enemies, it returned to Thor. The hammer flew with such a rapid speed, that it trailed a red flame behind it, like a comet entering the Earth's atmosphere. Thor could not wield this hammer without the metal gloves. Thor rode in a large golden chariot, drawn by 2 large ibexes. The 2 ibexes were immortal. In peacetime, when Thor was boring, he had his Capricorns sometimes slaughtered and eaten, leaving only 2 skeletons. The next morning the animals were brand new again, as if nothing had happened. The god Loki was Thor's constant companion on his adventures. Most myths describe Thor's fight against the giants. Once the giant Njord captured his faithful companion Loki and took Loki hostage, and demanded Thor come to him unarmed, and only then will Loki be released. When Thor entered the cave of the giant Njord, Thor did not expect a pleasant surprise. The giant Njord threw several glowing irons in the direction of Thor. But Thor was able to catch one of them, thanks to his iron gloves, and killed the giant Njord. On the way back home, Thor and Loki decide to spend the night in an abandoned cave. But the next morning, the two noticed that it wasn't a cave but the giant's fist Skrymir. However, Thor and Loki were able to escape unharmed from the presence of the giant Skrymir. Thor's daughter was traded for weapons for the city of Icer Asgard. It was agreed that his daughter would marry the god Mime, god of blacksmithing. Mime had the shape of a dwarf. Of course Thor didn't like this arrangement at all, and he and Loki hatched an ingenious plan. Thor knew that the branches turned to stone in sunlight. For this reason, Thor asked the forge god Mime a lot of puzzles to distract him, and to keep outdoors until the sun came up. The result was that Thor's daughter was able to run away from Mime's house before the unwanted marriage with the dwarf. In Ragnarok, Thor fights the son of Loki and the Midgard snake. Thor was able to cut off the head of the giant snake, but poison flowed out of the severed body. Thor dissolved in this acid-like poison. Thor's hammer was picked up by his son Magni, the god Loki. Loki was a god in Norse mythology, who had 2 personalities. On the one hand, he was evil hiding under a mask. This mask can take on almost any form. Loki was the god of cunning and deceit. Loki was the son of the giant Farbauti, and the goddess Rundi. Regardless of his origins, Loki was half an Icer. Because of this, Odin allowed Loki to stay in the city of Asgard. In his lifetime, Loki has brought many misfortunes to gods and humans. Among other things, Loki is responsible for the death of the god of spring, the god Balder. His actions have brought the world to the brink, at times closer to the Ragnarok. However, Loki's actions drew much anger from the inhabitants of Asgard. Loki was captured and tied to a rock with his own intestines. In addition, a large snake was hung over him, from which every day a little bit of poison dripped on his head. Every day a drop of the poison came on his head, which had an acid-like consistency, and gradually dissolved his skin and bones. This was associated with very severe pain. In this state, Loki waited for the end of the world, the Ragnarok. Norse mythology contains some very strange and brutal tales indeed. For example, that Loki begot the goddess of death Hel, the Fenris wolf, and the Midgard snake with the giantess Angerboda. In the form of a mare, Loki bore the stallion Svadilfari, the 8-legged horse Sleipnir, which he gave to Odin. These stories may sometimes simply reflect Viking life. Sometimes more and sometimes less. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please leave a subscription and a thumbs up. See you soon, your channel History Best.